MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol. It is a way of giving a model additional context by connecting it with programmatic data via an API. With MCP, you can talk to APIs using natural language via a large language model.
MCP, when it first came out, was so exciting because all of a sudden now your LLM could talk to the whole outside world. It could also access the file system. It was just this standardized protocol by which your model would have access to all sorts of different tools. One downside of MCP is that you would define these tools that you're giving to your model. In the definition for those tools, which could run hundreds of lines of instructions, imagine doing that for 20 different tools. And now you're just trying to have a conversation with your large language model. And all of that context is actually irrelevant to this particular interaction you're having. And so there's this context bloat that happened as you started adding more and more tools. And so managing the context became trickier as you were equipping it with more and more tools. Today, we also have something called skills. It's not a replacement for MCP, but it's sort of a complement to it. 80% of the time when we talk about skills, we're talking about a save prompt. For most folks, you can visualize a skill as just being a markdown file or a text file that has a prompt that you want to use over and over again. Now, skills can also go deeper than that. Skills can also include scripts. They can also include instructions on how to use command line tools or how to use other tools. The cool thing about skills is that they have what's called progressive disclosure. Let's say you have in your agent 20 skills that it can have. Each one of those skills is a 3-part definition. So the first part is what we call the front matter, or the first level, and that is sort of a summary of the skill. And there's a line in there that's going to tell the model, this is when you would use a skill. This is what it does. Then there's the body of the skill that has all the human readable English instructions on what the model should do. And then there's a third section, sort of optional, linked files. So if your skill includes scripts that you've written for it to run deterministically, you can have that. A lot of times your skills aren't going to have that, but it's sort of like the superpower if you choose to equip your skill with scripts and other tools. When your agent loads up, it is going to load up that front matter for all of the skills. And so it basically has sort of a internal registry of here's the things I can do and here's when I would reach for this tool, but it doesn't load up the instructions for that tool until it decides it needs it. And so this leads to a much more efficient usage of memory than if it were to just load up the entire definition for all the skills at the same time.
That makes a ton of sense. And the MCP, it's just not as compressible. We don't have like that front matter system. So it's going to take a lot more context, a lot more memory. And we also don't have the choice of whether or not to load it when we start our agent up.
And I think they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like oftentimes you're going to have both MCP and skills, and maybe the skills are going to be telling your agent how to use the MCP or the different tools that are available via MCP. But again, I think that just the really fascinating thing about this time in the industry is everything moves really fast, right? And we keep learning through each generation of practices that we give these things, right? And so, 18 months ago, MCP was like the thing. It's still very much a thing. Like connector, anytime you see a connector in whatever your favorite chat app is, there's probably MCP is powering that underneath. And then we also came up with, now skills, because I think one of the things we realized was that oftentimes people don't necessarily need external tools, but what they need is some way to capture a prompt and to reuse that prompt over and over again, or to like share the prompt. I can create a skill for my agent, I can iterate on it, I can dial it in, and then I can share it with my team, or I can share it with a coworker.
And that seems really powerful, not only because you can enclose business logic that you need to use over and over again, but because they're written in English. So people that aren't developers can write skills, share skills, and, just make everybody else go faster. So
it's like the hottest programming language is English. Like skills are allowing you to build your own agents, to program your own agents in English. And it's amazing. It's absolutely wild, like how much utility you can get out from just telling a machine, like, this is what I want you to do. And then it does that. And it's just like sort of a magical time to be alive.